A very good day, everyone. I welcome you all to this third session of the Advanced Masterclass series. So, today we are going to learn how to build last mile customization in ServiceDesk Plus using Deluge, a proprietary programming language developed by Zoho Corporation. This session will be handled by Mr. Jay Anand. He is the manager of support. He has got 12 years of experience in customizing and developing plugins for Service Desk Plus. He has also helped a lot of customers to integrate third-party tools with Service Desk Plus and also to create custom actions within the product. So before we go into the discussion, some of the house rules. All attendees are placed on mute by default. So there is a dedicated Q&A time at the end of the session, so you can reserve all your questions and you can ask it at the end of the session, and we'll try to answer most of it on the session live and every question via email. Use the Q&A option in the left side toolbar to ask your questions. You'll get a recording of this masterclass in a couple of days. You'll get an email with the link for the recording. And if you've got any feedback or questions, you can feel free to shoot your email to hello@servicedeskplus.com. All right, so before we proceed any further, I'd like to ask a question. So it's time for a poll. How many of you have experience in programming? I don't have. I personally don't have any experience with programming. So I always get intimidated when I see lines of codes. So that is where Jay Anand can help us. He can help us with writing, teaching us the fundamentals of programming, giving us the basics, and also help us start with our first script. All right, so I'm getting answers. So I could see that it's a mixed crowd in this session. So let me tell you what you can expect from this session. So for the beginners, Jayanand is going to take us through the fundamentals of the programming languages, the common fundamentals that's applicable to any programming language. And he's going to show you the advantages of using Deluge scripting language in Service Desk Plus. Right? So Deluge is a serverless scripting language that doesn't need a server. You can on the fly write codes, and he's going to show us how you can do that. All right, so without any further delay, I'm going to transfer this session to Mr. Jayanand, and he'll take us through this enlightening session. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Prem. Thank you so much for the introduction. Once again, I welcome you all to this webinar. And I just have a few questions or few problems in the beginning of my presentation. So I do have some thing in connection to this. So can anyone guess what is a result of this particular problem? All right, yes, we got a response. Great. Okay, so yeah, of course, it's a no-brainer, right? Yep. Okay, so how about this? So we have a little more complex problem here. So can anyone guess what is the value of U? All right, so we have 10 seconds. All right, yeah, I'm getting the answers. So how many of you performed this step by step? So how many of you computed what is the value of X and then found the value of Z and then T and then U? So yeah, I believe most of you have done that, right? Yeah, this is exactly what we are going to do in this particular session. So we are going to learn step-by-step programming, and we are going to write a full-blown code, and we're gonna make it working in the application. So that's exactly what we want to do. And moreover, mathematics is the base of programming. So if you could do this, you can definitely do programming. All right. Okay, so yeah, I hope most of you have worked with the customizations and integrations options, whatever we have offered with our previous versions of ServiceDesk Plus. And I hope most of you would have tried some of our Python scripts, whatever we have already published in our portal, right? In our knowledge base portal. But it has its own disadvantages. So I mean, for people who more have experience setting that up in their own installation, I hope you would have come across some of the challenges in getting that installed and getting that working, right? So yeah, say for example, if we take Python, yeah, it's a third-party application we need to install on the servers, and that requires installing Python, and we got to manage it separately. And then you also need to access the server every time for the changes in the script. Meaning if you want to change anything on the script, yes, you need to log into the server and do it. And these are all platform dependent, right? In case of Python or in case of PowerShell, it's going to be a platform dependent application or programming language. So if you want to run PowerShell on Linux, yeah, you need to install a separate package, and it has its own advantages and disadvantages, right? And the programs, whatever we have written, the scripts, whatever we have written in Python, yes, of course, Python is one of the easiest languages to start with, but still it has its own complex syntaxes. You need to learn all those to write even a simple code in Python, right? And yep, I hope most of you have experienced the time it took to set up that, yes, and also to test the scripts to make it working as per your exact requirements. It requires a lot of patience, right? And yeah, of course, it requires patience to find errors and debug it. And then in case of Java classes, I hope most of you would have not tried Java classes, but still we have provided the option to use the Java classes as well. For that, you need to have little more complex process of compiling it and finding the libraries and getting that added. So these are the disadvantages we had with our previous option of programming and ServiceDesk Plus, and that's why we brought in this integration with Deluge. So Deluge is a proprietary programming language of Zoho, right? So we kept the customers whomever doesn't have programming experience in mind, and we have developed this language. So it uses a natural syntax, and it's make the programming really simpler. So if it's going to be a little script, or you may be needing a kind of integration with another application, right? So it's going to be a few lines of code you'll be writing through which you're going to achieve what you needed. And most importantly, it's very secure, and you do have you can expect very good performance with the scripting. Even if you're doing or manipulating a lot of rich records, it's going to be delivering a very good performance, right? And the one other advantage of Deluge is you don't need a development setup. You practically don't need a development setup, that because it's right in the application. All you got to do is go open the window and start coding. So you're gonna witness all of this in few minutes. And before we move on further and discuss about how we can write scripts, we're gonna discuss on some of the fundamentals of the programming. So this is not specific to Deluge, and this is applicable to any programming language that we know of, right? So first one, let me start with the variables. So variables are a kind of an item, data item. It can hold multiple values during the runtime. That is, if you have a variable x, it can be assigned with number 10, and then during runtime, you can assign a different number, 20, or during the execution, it may change to 40 or 50 or 60. So the variable is a data item that can take more than one value during the runtime of the program. And then we are going to talk about the data types. So I have one other slide that talks about the different data types supported by Deluge. So these are the type of items that are supported in the Deluge programming language. So hope you have seen string, right? If you already have experience working with any programming languages, definitely you would know about what is a string, right? It's a series of characters, text, right? So similarly, we're going to see what are the different data types that are supported. And then we are going to look at the operators. So when I say operator, you can guess that it should be addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, right? So these are some of the operators. So we are going to see what are the different operators are supported in Deluge programming. And then we are going to talk about the expressions. So expressions are the combinations of variables and constants and operators, right? So we are going to say we are going to get an output from a program. Say the program would be, just to get the age of the person and return the statement, your age is a number, whatever we received from the input, right? So for that, what we do, we will get an input, what is your age, and get the number, and then we're going to print your age is, that's going to be a string with the operator plus, followed by the variable x, right? So that returns the resultant, your age is 30 or 40, right? Yeah, that's exactly what we are going to look at in the expressions. So the first topic, what we're gonna discuss is on the data types, right? So these are the different data types that are supported in Deluge. So string, of course, as you all know, it's going to be a series of characters. And then the next data type is big integer, right? So I have mentioned two numbers over here. Any number between these two numbers going to be considered as a big int. I don't know how to read it. So it should be some -9 something and 9223. That's a negative number and a positive number. And then decimal, yes, 10.66. Yeah, it's a decimal number. Timestamp, it's date and time. And Boolean, true or false. And the list. So these are something which we'll be using mostly in Deluge programming. So list, if you want to store a similar type of data into one particular container, that's going to be a list, right? And map, if you want to store different details about one particular item, then we're going to create a map and store it. And collection, it can be either list or map, right? So these are the supported data types in Deluge. All right. Okay. So we are going to code something in the application right now. So what I have done, I have compiled a workbook for you all. So if you could go under the workbook section or work notes handout section, you're going to find the workbook. So if you want to follow, if you want to try the samples, whatever we are discussing over this particular session, you can just copy and paste it and you can see how it works. And one more thing, we have made some mistakes intentionally on the workbook. So if you are trying out, there are possibilities that you might run into an error. So you might need we got to do a look at it once again so that you will find what is that particular error, and if you could fix it, that would be great, right? Okay, so let's start. So I got the enterprise version of ServiceDesk Plus here, and I have all the modules. I hope you can see that I'm using the enterprise version. So this Deluge programming can be done right in the application, as I said earlier, and that's available under request custom function. So if you go under admin tab, under incident management, you can find request custom function. So here you can create multiple custom actions and you can configure it on a business rule or custom triggers, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new custom action, right? And we're going to try out the basics, followed by we're going to write a full script on achieving a specific requirement, what we get normally when we are using ServiceDesk Plus, right? Okay, I'm going to name it as Deluge Training. So that's just a function name. It can be of anything. And here, if you notice, the custom function, the internal name of the custom function is request function ID. And here you can see that it returns a map. So as we discussed earlier, map is a kind of a container wherein we are going to put multiple values about a particular item, right? So if you're wondering what it is, we are going to see a sample and we're going to understand what exactly is that. And this particular function can carry two parameters. One parameter is a map. It's a request object, meaning if you are going to run the script, having a particular request as an input, this particular parameter gonna provide us the whole uh, data in a particular format. So we'll talk about what format it is and how it can be manipulated in a bit. And then another parameter is going to be context. And again, it's a map format. It's in the map format, right? Okay. So what we do is let's try to print what is there in these parameters, right? So for that, I'm using a method called info, right? info followed by request object. So I'm going to simply print what is there in the request object, right? And since this particular function needs a map to be written, I'm just putting in a map, an empty map, right? I just initialize the empty map here and I'm returning it, right? Let's see what happens. And also what I do is I'm going to return or print the another map, whatever we have here, right? So let me make expression over here, right? So context is right. So here if you notice context is a string and I have added an operator plus followed by the context, which is a variable, we get over here. So let me add, or let me modify the statement which we have above accordingly. All right. And one thing you got to be doing on each and every line of this particular programming, you got to use the semicolon at the end of it, right? So let's do a quick test and see how it works. All right, I have the same function name already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add something to this. Let's see how it works. So as soon as you click on save and test, it's going to ask you on what request you want to run the script. So this is for testing purpose, right? So this is one of the advantages of using Deluge over the previous model of running scripts, right? You can test it right here. You don't have to, go into the command prompt, run a command to see what is the output you're getting. So it's going to be pretty straightforward. You have the button right there. Clicking on it, that's going to get you an option to choose on what request you want to run. And there we go. You get the resultant. So yes, so we got the resultant over here. And if you're wondering what it is, this is JSON. That is, the whole request data is showing up in the JSON format, right? If you're wondering what is JSON format, I hope most of you would have used XML, right? So this is an alternative data exchange format for XML, right? So let me just beautify it, right? So I'm using one of the online tools to beautify this JSON so that we can see what is the data we have in here, right? All right. So here the complete request information is in the JSON format. Here you can see all the fields followed by the values. So if you notice some of the fields that contains another JSON nested in it. So here the technician is the field name. And then for the technician, you have another JSON object that contains the complete information of who is the technician, what is his name, what is his email address, and what's the ID. And for department, there is another nested JSON object that has the site name and the ID, right? So yeah, I think this particular tool makes it easier for us to see what exact data in there rather this one, right? And also let's quickly check what we have on the context, right? So that's going to be pretty small. So yeah, let's check that as well. Okay, so this has the information of who executed this and on what instance the request is. So the name of the instance is ID. Yeah, you got the ID, and we also get the status of that particular instance, right? And also the current date. Great. So these are the information available on these two maps, right? So the function that has got two parameters, one is the request object and another one is the context object. All right. So now we are going to learn how to manipulate these maps, or how to create a map and how to manipulate it. So this is exactly what we are going to see in the rest of the presentation, right? Okay, so here I have the step-by-step instruction. And also if you open the work notes, there you're gonna see the examples, whatever I'm going to show you in this particular session, right? So the first thing what we're gonna do is we are going to create a map. So how do we create a map? And before I go and talk about the map, I just want to show you one other thing, one other item over here. So this process is called commenting. So what I'm doing right now is commenting the line. So this will make this particular line not to execute, right? And if you want to comment out the whole block, you can do this way, right? So these two lines will not be executed when you run this particular script, right? Okay. So I'm going to create a new map. So this is the line which you should use to initialize a map, right? New map is a variable, it can be of anything. I'm saying that I'm going to construct a map, right? So now it's time to add some values to it. So here, this is one of the ways you can make the programming easier. So as soon as you type in, it's going to suggest you what are the different methods available for the map, right? So it says put. Now I'm going to add name and value, right? So here, the name of the field is name and the value is Jen. And new map again, and I'm going to put another pair of name and value. So I'm going to say department ServiceDesk Plus, right? and new map.put. Right? So what I did, I just created a map. So let's print this map and see what we get. Right? So how to print this info? All right, let's do save and test now. And once again, it's ask us on what request you want to run the script. Execute. There we go. Okay, so here you can see we just created a map, but the resultant of the map is JSON. And now we can imagine how our scripting session going to be easier, right? You don't have to say that we want to create a JSON, or we don't want to, go around with multiple syntaxes to create a JSON. So when you initialize a map, yeah, the resultant would be a JSON. Okay, so now we have learned how to create a map, right? One thing we need to be very keen about, or very sure about, is you need to use a comma here, because when you see a JSON, you would put in a the colon out there. So in case of creating a new map programmatically, you need to remember that you got to use the comma, right? Okay, so let's keep this aside. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to extract the values from the map, right? So rather we extract the values from the new map created, I think it's better if we could extract the values right from the request object, right? Okay, let's say we want to extract the request ID from the request object, right? So the syntax is, yep, we are creating a variable request ID, and we are going to store the value request object dot get. Right? So get is a method we're going to use to extract a particular value from the JSON object. Right? So let's go into the JSON. Okay, and let's say we're going to extract the ID. Okay? And now we are going to print this using the info. All right, save and test. There we go. So we got the ID over here. So we ran this particular script over 6472 requests, and we got the ID. Likewise, you can extract other values as well. Say I just want to extract the subject, request object dot get, save and test. Oh, you know what? I didn't print it. Okay, let me do that as well. Ready, and the subject is, let's see what it returns. There we go. All right, so subject. Okay, I believe the subject of the particular request is the request ID itself, right? Okay, great. Okay, so now we learned how to create map and how to extract the values from the map, right? And the next one we are going to discuss is on the list manipulation, right? We learned about how to create a map and how to extract the values from the map. And now we are going to create a list, and we're going to put values to the list, and we're going to see how we can extract values from the list, right? I'm going to comment out this. Now, the same way as we created the map, we are going to create a new list, initialize a new list, right? New list equal to list, and new list dot, and in case of map, and this time we are going to use add. Since we are adding values to the list, we are using the method add. So we are just adding the names to this list. All right, so we have added these three values to the list, and let's print this and see how it looks like, right? Save test, same request ID, execute. There we go. So it has created an array of names, right? So you got three values and all separated by comma, right? Great. And now, if we want to extract the value available on a particular position, how we can do that, right? So for that, we got to learn the numbering sequence in the list. So here, the first value we have in here will be on the number 0, position 0. Likewise, this would be on number 1, and this would be on number 2. So let's say if you want to extract the value which is on the position number 2, what we got to do is info new list dot get 2, right? When you specify a number, you don't have to specify within double quotes. All right. Now let's see what it returns. So it should be returning Priya. There we go. Right. So now we have learned how to create a map and how to extract the values from the map, right? I'm sorry, from the list. Okay, so let me comment this as well. Okay, so next thing that we're gonna learn is looping. Okay, so I don't have to comment this. So the next thing we're gonna learn is how to loop the values, right? So in case of other programming languages, you may have to initialize a variable with the value 0, and then we got to check if we have reached the maximum number, and then you got to increment the values one after another. So the format would be like I equal to 0. I guess most of you would have used this. I greater than or lesser than some number, right? And then I plus plus. So this is the syntax that you have with many other programming languages, right? So in case of Deluge, this is going to be simple. So for each, right? Let's say name in new list. All right. So here we are saying for each value. So the value will be stored in the variable name in the new list. Okay, and then we start with open and closing brackets, right? And whatever you want to write, we're going to do it in here. So let's create an expression once again. Okay, so let me comment this out, save and test. There we go, right? So we have iterated the values in the list, and it printed as the name is in the list is Jai, the name in the list is Prem, and the name in the list is Priya, right? So it's going to be pretty straightforward. Just one line that does the iteration between the values, right? Okay, so now let's see how you can create control statements, right? So control statements are nothing but if, else if, and else, right? So I'm going to incorporate control statements here. So if name equals check. All right. So here comes a little thing that we need to take care of, right? So when you're assigning a value to variable, it's going to be single equals. And if you're verifying if the variable contains the particular value, you got to specify double equals, right? So let's say the name in the list is was doing the training now. Right? So I just want to make it a complex expression, right? And else if. So if the particular condition doesn't match, then try this. Okay, so let's see what it returns, right? So now I have added if statement to verify if the name is Jai, then print this. If it's Prem, then print this. And then if it is not any of these, then print this, right? Okay, so this is a control statement. We have created a control statement block within a loop for the same request. Anyway, I have to choose that. There we go. So I have verified, yes, name in the list is Jay, who is doing the training now. Prem is the co-trainer, the other name is list, the Priya, right? Great. So now we have learned how we can loop. Okay, great. Now I'm going to discuss on a couple of important methods that are readily available in Deluge. Say, for example, in case of Python or any other programming language, if you want to access a web-based API, right? If you want to invoke a URL, submit some parameters, and to get the output, yeah, you may be writing some 5 to 10 lines of code, right, in Java or Python. But in case of Deluge, it's going to be a single line, right? There is a method called invoke URL, in which you can specify what URL you want to invoke and what type of what method you got to use and what are the headers and parameters. So you can use pretty much what is needed for invoking that particular API. All right. So we are going to see how simple it is and how quickly you can incorporate it so that we can integrate with other application or to create your own customizations in a bit, right? And the response, whatever we receive for that particular format would be this one. So this is going to have what is the response code, the application, whatever response, we're going to get that in the JSON format, right? Again, we know how to extract the values from the JSON, right? Great. Okay, so now we got into the time in which we're going to write a script. So you do have the workbook with you. I hope most of you would have the workbook open with you. So in case if you want to try out something, you can do it on your own installation. So all you have to do is just copy and paste, and it does have some intentional errors. you may have to figure that out as well, right? Okay, let's start from the scratch. I'm going to delete off all this and I'm going to start from the beginning. Okay, so what is the first thing we want to do? We want to extract the values. Okay, the scenario here which we want to achieve is, say we have a request, and based on the value whatever chosen on the request, we want to create a child request, right? So this particular scenario can be applied over for creating a request on another instance, or creating a request on another product, or to post any notification to another channel. So pretty much anything that involves an API method to be called, you can use this, right? So this could be a simplest sample that we can derive over this session. You can manipulate it and you can use it for any such integrations or customizations that you want to do in ServiceDesk Plus. All right, so let's start off with getting the values from the request object, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to get the request ID, subject. We are going to construct a new map, and we are going to call our own API URL, and we are going to submit all the details, get the response, and then we are going to update the request saying that a new request is created, right? So first thing, we are going to get the values, right? Request ID equals object dot get, and subject equals subject dot get, and then requester info equals object dot get requester. So here we have something different when comparing to these variables, right? In case of requester info, this is going to return a JSON object. So yeah, let's print this and see what it looks like, right? Save and test, execute. All right, so here the requester info returns this particular JSON, that is a nested JSON. So if you want to extract the values, yes, we know how to do it, right? Requester name should be extracted like requester info dot get, right? So this is the syntax we should use to get the values right from the nested JSON object. All right. Okay, so we are not going to do this. So I'm commenting this. Now we have extracted whatever values we want from the requested object. And now we are going to create a new request map, and then we are going to supply this as an input data to the API method. So if you're wondering what we are doing at present, so we can, so this is the, okay, let me log in again. I'm going to show you the API documentation, what we have within the application. So I'm going to use that API, right? And I'm going to create a request by supplying the input parameters in the specific format, right? So going under API, documentation, request, add request. So here you can see what URL we should use and what is the method and how the input data should be, right? So this is exactly what I'm trying to construct programmatically using the Deluge programming language, right? So this is what I have to construct. So I'm again initializing a new map, new request, initialized, and I'm putting in the values. So let's say subject is, just for the identification, I'm using the subject, child request for, new request, dot put requester. So since I'm going to use the same requester, I don't have to extract the values and reconstruct a JSON object. Instead, I'm using the same JSON object as a value for the requester parameter, right? Okay, so I just created a new map with a limited information, right? And I think we can also add what should be on the description. That's done. Okay, so now we have extracted the values and we have initialized a new map to get submitted. And now we got to invoke the URL. So how we are going to do it? Let's say create request result, invoke URL. And now here comes a block wherein we are going to specify what URL we should use and what is the method we are going to use and what input parameters we're going to provide, right? So URL, and here again, I'm going to specify what URL I should be using. To slash, going back to the documentation, right? And now I'm going to specify what method I want to use. Yeah, it should be post, and then the parameters. So here, if you want to see what parameters are being submitted in the background, here is a tip for you. So here, if you click on try now, and you can enable the browser tools, and there we can see what is the exact method and what is the URL being invoked and what are the parameters being submitted, right? So here comes the input data with the complete information of the new request whatever being created, and then there is another parameter called portal ID, and in addition to that we should be using the technician key. So let's construct this programmatically in Deluge, right? Going here, and this is another way of constructing it. So instead of constructing it programmatically, you can do this way, right? So here, if you notice, I think we need to specify something else over here. So here, the whole subject description and requester and impact details are listed inside a particular JSON variable, right? Or JSON field, right? It's request. So what we're going to do is we're going to construct another and we're going to nest all these details into that, right? So I'm initializing one more map. So now we have constructed the input data as per the specifications of the API, right? So let's see, I'll print that and we can see how the particular input data is, right? So input underscore data. So just like this way, and I'm going to specify what value should get. So we have already constructed it programmatically. So I'm simply copying and pasting it, right? And then that's followed by portal ID. By default, I want to create an ID. So I'm using number 1 and then followed by technician key, right? So I would need the technician key now. I'm getting it from here. There we go. We got it. Bring back. It's the technician key within double quotes. And there is an additional parameter that we got to specify, which is format. And let's specify that we want the data in JSON format. All right, so that's it. So these are the 3 lines I've written to invoke the URL and to get the resultant. So let's see how it works, right? So I'll add an info statement to return a result of this particular method invoke, and let's see. All right, so we got an error in the line 16. Okay, so I missed out a semicolon. Let's test it now. New request map. Okay, that's a typo. Okay, so that's a typo. Okay, that's done. Hopefully this should run. Yes. Choosing the request, execute. All right. Okay, so we got an error over here. So field department type failed, message unable to pass the JSON. Okay, so it has a problem with one particular field, then that's department. So I know where exactly the problem is. It's because of the requester, whatever used, right? Maybe that particular requester department is not valid. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to pick another request and see if that works out. There we go. So we got a response, and this is a request created. So let's see what we have. Okay, so this is the information of the request, whatever being created, right? And here comes the response status. Status code is 2000, right? So it means the request is created successfully. All right, so we are at the we have created the request successfully, right? And now we are going to create a control statement to tell the program what to do in case of a successful message and what to do an unsuccessful invoke, right? So what we're going to do is we are going to extract the response code. So we all know how to do it, right? So response equals create request result dot get response status, right? And we need to get the response code. Again, it's a nested JSON object, right? So response status equals response dot get. Right. So now it should have the value, and I'm going to check if the response status is 2000. Then do this. Else do this. So here comes the important part wherein we can do some specific actions on the request with the response, whatever we are going to return from this Deluge script, right? So here we have three options available. So the response, if the response going to be in a specific format, it can update the request. That is, you can update the field values in the request, or you can create a note on the request, or you can create or add approvals to the request. So these three options will be helpful for you to update back the ticket or to perform a specific actions on the ticket, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a note to the request saying a child request is created, right? So before I do that, let me just get the request ID created. All right. So now let me see the response. So here it has a request field, and in the request field we have the complete JSON object that contains the request information, right? So I'm going to extract the value from it. I need to extract the request ID from it. New, okay, request ID. All right, I'm just initializing some variable here. So it's going to be the create request result dot get request, and this is one of the ways you can make the Deluge programming more easier. So we can write it continuously, right? So this will return the request ID, and it will be stored in the variable request ID here. All right. And now I'm going to invoke syntax. So rather typing in, I'm going to just copy and paste it. So if you're wondering where this comes from, you can go into the documentation of custom triggers in ServiceDesk Plus. So I'm going to do a quick Google search to show you how to find it. So this is the way I find this as well, right? Great. So here we have this instructions on how we can do this format which you got to return the data. So based on this particular data, a note would be added, or the fields would be updated, or you can add approvals on the request. So you have the complete set of instructions and a sample on how to do it, right? So that is exactly what I copied here. So what I want to do is I just want to create a note on the parent request saying that a new child request has been created. And if the response code is not 2000, then I'm going to return a failure message. So that I can do using this one. Result, failed, message, error, adding. Great. So that's done. And now we have to return this in case of successful invoke. We got to return this in case of failure invoke. So let's do this, and let's see how this script works. There we go, no errors. And I'm going to invoke with one of the requests here. Execute. There we go. So this is the result. So if we configure this particular script in custom triggers or business rules, so this is going to run and return this particular value. So if we get this particular JSON as a resultant of a script, this is going to create a note in the request. So let's see how that works. So I'm going to save this. I'm going into custom triggers, add a new action. So trigger created in the training session. When a request is created, and here comes the criteria wherein I'm choosing something in random, but I need to use it when I'm creating the request. So category is desktop hardware, execute custom function, Deluge training 2, and saving it. Yep, that's all we got to do. Great. Now I'm going to create a new request. So let's see how our script going to work. So add administrator. So my criteria is the category should be desktop hardware and adding a new request. Great. We got a new request created. And if you want to see whether our script has invoked and whether it has worked or not, we got to do that in the history tab. Okay, so there is an error in adding a child request. I think I know why it is happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another request because there is no department for the administrator, right? So the resultant we get when on the request object would be no department. So that is the reason we are getting it. I'm the request with a different user on it so that we can successfully get the script working, right? If you want, you can manipulate that a little bit, but I hope you all can understand what exactly gone wrong. So I'm just trying out with another user, and let's see whether we could get the new request created as it's supposed to be, right? Okay, there we go. We got a new request. Let's go into the history. Okay, so we got an error again. Okay, so what we're gonna do is let's quickly go into the script and let's change that requester JSON object and see if we could get that fixed, right? So going under request custom function and editing this. All right. So instead of using this, I'm going to construct. So that's going to make it a little more complex. So I'm going to construct this one, the requester, it has the ID number 4, right? Great. So requester map equal to requester object. Okay, what I do is I'm going to hard code it in here, right? So let's say it's going to be values 4. Great. So let's test this and see if it is working all right as it's supposed to be. And then we are going to try again with another request and see how it's going to work, right? So I'm choosing some request in random. There we go. It works. So let's hope it works on the request as well. Yes, similar such errors are pretty common. But if you have a prior programming background, I hope you all would have come across this situation. So let's try this now. Hopefully this should work perfectly as it's supposed to be this time. Add request. Going back into the history. Okay. Again, we got an error. Okay. I think this is something different. So, yep, let's fix this. Before that, I just want to check something over here. So, there we go. You know what is the problem? So it's executing the wrong one, right? I've disabled it. Going back there, creating a new request. Categories desktop hardware, add a new request. And this time we should have a new request created without any issue, right? So going to the history tab, let's see. Looks like a success message. There we go. Yep, it was a success. A child request has been created for this particular request. So let's go in there and see if we have the new request. Yep, the child request for 6479. There we go with the requester name administrator. Yes, we did it. So we got a new request created. So now we can imagine what role we can perform using manipulate the script a little bit so that you can call the APIs of other system, or if you want to create a request in another instance, yeah, that can be done, right? And also with the resultant, whatever we can return from the script, you can either add or add a note or you can set approvers, right? So these change the custom functions are available in the change module as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of samples that we have in the change module, right? In the change module, similar to setting up approvers on the request, it is possible to set roles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate a couple of the scripts, whatever I have here, and show let me demonstrate the possibilities that you can achieve, right? So here I've created the script saying that, okay, if I create a change with the category user administration, so let me double check if I've set the same criteria. So change, custom triggers, there we go. All right, so here comes, yes, categories user administration, set change manager, right? So I'll show what is written on the script in a bit. And this is for network upgrade. Let's say I haven't chosen any change owner or change manager. So let's say if that is setting up the change manager and change planner. Yes, there we go. So likewise, based on a specific condition, we can set the people to the respective roles, right? I just have one more sample to show up. So this is for demonstrating how we can do integrations with other systems. So we have our own chat channel, I mean chat tool called Click, Zoho Click. I hope some of you might be using it. So what we can do in this is we can use the APIs and we can post a message on the chat when a particular condition is matched. So I've created a workflow in such a way that when we create a change request specified with emergency uh, type, so that's going to post a message on a chat group, right? So that's exactly what we are going to do. Let's say this is going to be a ransomware attack on a payroll server. So this I have chosen the emergency type, right? So yeah, that's an emergency. I've already chosen the workflow, saving it. All right, there we go. Here comes the notification, and clicking on it, yes, it shows up a notification saying that an has been created. Let me show that real quick. There we go. An emergency change has been created with the title ransomware attack, payroll server. Yep, please check service desk for more information, right? So, yep, we have integrated successfully with another application, right? So, if you're wondering what code I have used, yeah, that's going to be pretty simple. Let me show you the first custom function that we have created on change to get the change manager and change planner set, right? There we go. So this is just a simple script. So I'm returning this. So it sets up the particular user as a change manager and the change planner. So if you want, you can programmatically modify it and you can set it up based on a specific criteria. Likewise, I have used the invoke URL for setting up or creating a notification on the chat channel, right? All right. Yep. So we have learned the fundamentals of the programming in Deluge, and then we have learned how to build a script. I think we can even keep this as a template for integrating other applications or any customizations that you want to build. And also the work notes, whatever we are used, going to be really helpful. So if you want, you can try it out, and that gives you an experience of how we can build the scripts in Service Desk Plus, right?
Thank you so much, Jai, for the wonderful session. You took us through the fundamentals of programming as well as you showed us how you can do that with Deluge. All right, so it's a very good place to start your programming uh, skill. So I would say uh, with Deluge, we have started looking into the platform capabilities that can be added to Service Desk Plus. So it's good to know how to code with Deluge. It'll open a lot of arenas so that you can integrate with a variety of native ManageEngine and Zoho applications as well as third-party applications. So there are a lot of Deluge scripts already available, and also Deluge is used for creating chatbots in the cloud version of ServiceDesk Plus, which will later be introduced into the on-premises version as well. So there are a lot of resources available in our websites. Please do visit our admin guide, release notes, product videos, community, and also our support portal. You can go to servicedeskplus.com/support. That will take you to the support portal where you can get a lot of other resources as well. And do write us to hello@servicedeskplus.com if you need further clarity, if you need a one-on-one session, we'll be glad to assist you with. All right, so we also do free product training and consultation, which is a very privileged program that's done by our ITSM Cares customer support team. So do write us to itsmcares at manageengine.com to book a slot. You'll have a 45-minute free one-on-one training session with one of our product experts. All right, with that, I would like to thank you all for participating actively in this webinar. And please let us know your feedback, and any further queries, do let us know. Thank you so much, and you have been a wonderful audience. Cheers.